Good morning, First Christian Church. By my count, today marks the beginning of week 15 in our Foundations devotional reading. Thus, I'll be commenting on the first two chapters of the book of 1 Samuel. As we saw last week, the book of Ruth provides an optimistic contrast to the dysfunction of the book of Judges. 1 Samuel continues that positive note, and it does so with the miraculous birth of a child. Babies signify new life, and they point to a new future. And they're a miracle all by themselves. The birth of Samuel, of course, is not the first time that God used a remarkable birth story as a sign that he was ushering in a new era, nor would it be the last. But this morning I'll point you towards another contrast. In this text, we are introduced to the priest Eli and his two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. Eli was a weak and inept leader, but his sons were straight-up wicked, evil men. In chapter 2, we see that, among other things, they would help themselves to the choice portions of meat that the faithful would bring to the tabernacle as an offering to the Lord. Regarding this, the narrator comments in verse 17, "Thus the sins of the young men was very great in the sight of the Lord. For the men treated the offering of the Lord with contempt." They robbed God by not treating the offerings and sacrifices that were meant for him, by treating the offerings and sacrifices that were meant for him as a way to enrich themselves. Now, compare that with Hannah's attitude towards God. In her barrenness, she had cried out to God, and God had heard her prayer and blessed her with a son. Yet instead of hoarding this blessing, she gave Samuel to the Lord, and she did so with a heart of worship. The contrast here is striking. Hophni and Phinehas steal from God and abuse his house, while Hannah sacrificially gives the best of what she has to God, trusting that the giver is better than the gift. In Mark chapter 12, verses 13 through 17, we read that the religious leaders were trying to trap Jesus with a gotcha question. The text reads like this: And they sent to him, that's Jesus, some of the Pharisees and some of the Herodians to trap him in his talk. And they came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are true and do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances, but truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not?" But knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, "Why put me to the test? Bring me a denarius and let me look at it." And they brought one, and he said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" And they said to him, "Caesar's." Jesus said to them, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, and to God the things that are God's." And they marveled at him. This text, of course, has many points of application, and even more so as we're in the midst of tax season. But as it has been pointed out, what the Pharisees should have done was to ask Jesus what belongs to God, to which Jesus may have looked at them and asked the same question: "Whose likeness is inscribed upon you?" See, I believe that Jesus' point was that God desires us to know him and to bow before him in worship and to give our lives to him. God calls us to give ourselves, as Paul would later call, living sacrifices. We do this when we recognize, as Hannah did, that there is none holy like the Lord, that there was no one or no thing that is worth giving our lives to aside from God. That's why Hannah could give her firstborn son to serve the Lord, for she knew that he alone was worthy of that sacrifice and honor. Eli's wicked sons made the mistake of believing that physical contentment and gratification was more valuable than knowing and serving the Lord, and thus they willingly robbed God of what belonged to him, and they sacrificed themselves on the altar of fleeting pleasure. This they did at the cost of their very lives. So, church, may we all worship God as Hannah did, and give ourselves wholeheartedly to the Lord. For not only is he alone worth giving our lives to, but he is also the giver of immeasurable and eternal blessings. As always, be safe, wise, and loving. May God bless you.